Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you have joined us today for Up and to the Right. It is always a pleasure to be able to have you, whether you are choosing to watch this or listen to it. But I hope that you'll take a moment to share this podcast that happens each and every week, but especially today. Today is, to me, a very urgent, a very time-sensitive issue with what's happening with a worldwide crisis right now, and that is we're going to be talking about Ukraine, specifically the people of Ukraine, ministries that have happened there. And I have with me a guest that I've been looking forward to this opportunity over the last few days as I've been thinking about this. And I called him actually yesterday and asked, but Jim King, and Jim King has been a friend of mine for a number of years. And so I'm so glad that you are joining us, Jim. And so thank you for taking the time to be a part.
Thank you, Pastor Rodney. Thank you for calling and checking on us a couple of times this week. It means more than you know. And just glad to be with you today.
Well, Jim, inform us a little bit about who you are. Okay, tell us a little bit about, obviously, your wife, your wonderful bride, and then family. Give us a little bit of information about you and also your ministry experience.
Well, I'm Okie born and bred from Bartlesville, where I was born, and my wife's dad pastored there when I was a teenager, and that's how we met and got married, and went to Bible school and went into ministry straight out of Bible school. That's been quite a few years ago, and we have two children. They each in turn have children. Our son, Drew, runs our missions office in Tulsa. He has two children, two boys. Our daughter, Natalie, she and her husband pastor a church in Austin, Texas, and they have four children. And also, my wife's mother is Betty Calabrese, a friend of yours that you're very close to, and you've been such a support to through the years, and we're grateful for that. And so Oklahoma is our home, and we want to say thanks to North Church for all that you're doing to reach not only your community, but the world, and taking interest in the people of Ukraine. We're deeply appreciative.
Well, I just want you to know that our prayers are going out to you. We've, as a church, been praying, and I know that people all around the world are praying, and obviously it's needed. So let me just ask a little bit about. I think it's very important to understand. How did we get here in regards to this situation in Ukraine? You have Russia that has now invaded the territory of Ukraine, which is a sovereign country. Tell us about how we got here.
Well, my understanding of it, I guess, to go back in history a little bit, Pastor Rodney, is how we got called to Ukraine. You know, Pam and I had been in ministry for a number of years and had pastored a church in our early 30s and felt impressed that the Lord was leading us in a different direction. And in 1991, in a time of prayer, the Lord very clearly spoke to me. And this was in a time when perestroika was just beginning to take place. The Soviet Union, all of the sister states that comprised the Soviet Union with Russia began to split off, like Poland, the Baltic states, Ukraine. It was all at that time. And then in early 1992, I received an invitation to go to Russia and preach a crusade. And through a series of events, I felt the Lord wanted me to do that, and I went. It was actually Siberia. This was April of 1992, so it'll be next month, it'll be 30 years. And when I got there, we saw the hopelessness on people's faces. Those that are old enough to remember, you remember there were bread lines they would show on TV, and the challenge that the people were facing at that time. And so I went and did that. And I came home, and then they asked me to go again, and I went again, and I would come home rejoicing at how many people got saved, but yet grieved in my heart because there weren't any churches for them to connect with, or very few. The church had been underground for 70 years. And long story short, the Lord put it in my heart very clearly and distinctly what his assignment for us was, and that was to move to Kiev, Ukraine. And that was in 1993 when he spoke that to us, and to work with the nationals to plant churches in this new opportunity that presented itself. And so through that time, we did, and there were some really miraculous things that happened that even opened the door for that to become a possibility. And make a long story short, we did move there and began working with the national church as they were beginning now to see an opportunity. They didn't have to be underground, but could plant churches. And so we would take the young men that were trained, and then a team would come from America. We partnered with an organization called One Hope that sent in teams and literature, and we would plant the churches. They would send the team and literature. And so we did that there for 2 or 3 years and began to plant churches. To this day, we're grateful the Lord's enabled us to be part of planting 206 churches among Russian-speaking peoples. And we thought that would be pretty much, the whole focus. In the process of that, about 1995, the Lord impressed on me to start shipping large quantities of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But to just pause here in the story, the dialogue, is to see the companionship between Russia and Ukraine. Through my life, I've been amazed at how many people call all of that Russia because that's the image we have. But they were two very distinct countries. At the end of World War II, at the Yalta Conference, when things were split up between Churchill and Stalin and President Roosevelt, there were lines drawn, and Ukraine, with those other member states, became part of what became the Soviet Union. And so Ukraine had always been its own nation, its own identity, and there has been about a 400-year history of this fighting for control of Ukraine and not. Largely, I believe, because of the rich resources in Ukraine. One thing, not only its geographical proximity, but the geographical and the resources. Ukraine is about the largest country geographically in Europe, and it is rich in natural resources. And it sits in a very strategic place. Obviously, that is part of what is the conflict going on right now. And they're like sister states. And if you just study their history a little bit, their history is interwoven like a tapestry, these two nations called Ukraine and Russia, through history. It's almost like cousins or brothers fighting. I was in Ukraine right before the war ended. I flew out on the last day of the Olympics, and I did that intentionally because I told my wife, I don't think Putin will do anything to tick off China during the Olympics. So I'm going to buy my ticket to fly out on that day. And sure enough, the next week it began. And while I was there, you'd have had a hard time finding, I think, too many people that thought what is happening now would happen at the level that it is. There's been a lot of conjecture for a long time about what Putin's motives were, whether he wants to take the whole country or part of it. What I think's gotten lost in the narrative is there's been fighting over there since 2014 when he took Crimea and that eastern perimeter. So the fighting has been going on for all this time. So I think to some degree, people became a little bit not ambivalent to it, but when I was there right before the war started, it was life as usual, life as normal. Maybe a lot of it was people not wanting to think about the possibility. So, what's broken out's been quite a shock to a lot of people. And I'll circle back. If you got questions you want to throw in here, Pastor, just do. Why I paused at the humanitarian relief part of it in 1995 was to fast forward to today and the situation that is going on today and the challenge it is presenting for people. Because of having the privilege of ministering there for now about 30 years, we've developed long-term, deep relationships with people in the country and with churches in the country. And in fact, I was on a Zoom prayer meeting with a very strong church. I can't say where, but in Ukraine, they asked that it stays anonymous. This pastor I've known for 25 plus years has his whole church gathering together in Zoom prayer meetings daily. I joined with them today. And some of the images on the Zoom, some people were in like shelters in the dark. Some were in their homes. People are in all type of different situations. It's a very dire situation for them. it brings us back to the wisdom of God in what his ministry calling was for us. When we went there, we thought it was just to plant churches, which is a wonderful thing, and building the kingdom of God. But when the Lord spoke that to me in 1995, start shipping large quantities of aid to Ukraine, I resisted it. And in 95, we came home for the summer. And we were in Tulsa at our office, and a man called me, and he introduced himself. And I did not know him. He didn't know me, but he had attended a church that we were in relationship with that had something in their church bulletin about a crusade in Ukraine. And through a series of events, he tracked me down, and he said, I work with an organization that provides humanitarian relief to third world countries, and I have the nation of Ukraine on my heart, and it won't go away. Because the problem is, though I feel these containers are to go to Ukraine, we don't know anybody in Ukraine. And this pastor gave me your name and number. And he said, would you have any interest in receiving any of this? And mind you, I said I had been rejecting what the Lord had said to me, thinking I'm here to be a church planter and I've got plenty to do. And there is a lot of corruption in this type of thing with customs. I don't want to get involved. And so the guy calls me and asks me that. And I said, well, I don't know if I would or not. What's the parameters? And he said, well, it's 2 40-foot long containers loaded with medical supplies, ready to go somewhere. I feel they need to go to the Ukraine. Could you use them? I asked him what they were. They were not expired. They were current supplies. It was extremely valuable stuff. At the same time, I had access to video footage of kids in Ukraine strapped in a chair getting a tonsillectomy without any anesthetic whatsoever because they didn't have any, coming out of the demise of the Soviet Union and the brokenness of it. It was not there. The only way to get it was black market. And even though I saw such need, I regret to say I was not really willing to get involved at that point. But then I asked him, I said, what would it cost me? He said, nothing, we'll give it to you. He said, if you will sign a contract that you'll donate it to communities that need it. I said, what will it cost me to ship it there? He said, it won't cost you anything. All you got to do is sign that contract and the U.S. government will ship it to you free of charge to your warehouse. And so as I listened, I thought, well, not a lot of risk in this, is there? And so long story short, they, at that time, gave us 3 containers and we shipped them into Ukraine. We registered a humanitarian fund with the government, and all of this happening, never being able to foresee things like today. And I don't know if you want me to go into it. It's probably not time, but it was really a miraculous story of why the supplies came at that moment, because the door was going to be closed.
Jim, just I would say, Jim, go into that a little bit. Just keep talking, because I think this is just wonderful information for our people to be able to hear. And number one, I like hearing it. So you go ahead and take that opportunity. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Well, what happened was we had 4 teams coming that fall, and we were going to plant 4 churches. But this time we had our program pretty well lined out, we thought. And the stuff's on the ship. It's coming over. I haven't the foggiest idea what I'm going to do with it when it arrives. And we go to the first city. It's actually a city that's been a lot in the news this week called Sumy, S-U-M-Y, Ukraine. It's been on the news a lot. It's on the eastern border of Ukraine and Russia. It's been under quite a bit of attack. And we were going to plant a church, and we go in with our team that first week. And what we would do would be assemblies during the day. And then we'd have our evangelistic crusades at night. We'd rent like an opera house. And the city government made a contact with one of our Ukrainian employees and asked for me to come in the first day. And usually it was like, thank you for coming. We're glad you're here. You can visit our schools. This was just the opposite. They began to lambaste me, call me every name in the world, that I was breaking the laws, a lawbreaker. What did I think I was doing, bringing Americans in and thinking they could go into a school? One Hope was providing Bibles for the kids in schools. They were the first organization asked by the Russian government to come in when the door opened in 91. And they were sending all kinds of material to us. And up to that point, we'd been able to give them out in the schools. They said, you cannot do that. You have to have a religious visa. Well, to make it short, what happened was, while God in the spring and early summer of 95 was impressing me start shipping aid to Ukraine, the laws of Ukraine were changing. Well, while we were back in America, and I did not know it, but they changed it that if you were going to do any type of religious activity, you not only had to have a visa to get into the country, but a religious visa. I'd never heard of such thing in Ukraine. It's because they never had that requirement, but it was now law and I didn't know it. So basically I'd brought all these people in without a religious visa. And the man that was in charge of the committee in the mayor's office said, you'll go back to the hotel, get your team, get on the bus, leave this city immediately. You're not welcome here. And I was telling him, I'm not a lawbreaker. I don't break laws in America. I won't break your laws. I said, sir, I didn't come here to do that. And I could see he wasn't evil. He wasn't mean. He just wasn't going to lose his job over me. And of course, we all know that if you need something to happen, you got to get to the person with the clicker. And it was real obvious he had the clicker. He could write us religious visas for our group right there in that office. And so as I'm sitting there, I'm just praying, God, what do I say to these men? Partly, to be honest with you, because I was going to be embarrassed in front of 20 Americans that had paid all this money to come over there. I said, what do I say to him? And I just felt the Lord impress me. Tell him about the hospital supplies that are on the way. And so I said, sir, I don't think you understand our organization. We are a two-faceted organization. We have two arms. What I didn't tell him was we were growing the second arm right there in his presence. I was figuring out what we were going to do with the supplies. I said, we have this one arm that is, yes, here to help your people morally and spiritually. We believe that's important for your youth and your people. But our other arm is humanitarian. We provide hospital supplies in certain cities where we go with our program. And of course, when I said that, his countenance changed because their hospitals were just bare like I described earlier. And I said, but our organization is so structured that the two arms have to work together. They can't work independent of one the other. I later told my wife, I said, had a board meeting in there, nobody else showed up, so I made a decision. I said, the two arms have to work together, meaning that if you kick us out, that's fine. We won't go with our religious literature to the schools, but you're never going to get any hospital supplies from us. And when I said that, he said, Mr. King, I apologize to you. We have been hugely misinformed. I had no idea that's what you were about. And frankly, I didn't know it either till that moment. But he said, please stay. Don't leave. You can keep renting that opera house for your night meetings. In fact, I will come. I will listen to you talk some night myself. And he did show up. And we planted that church, and we never got kicked out after that. Now, I'm telling that story because of the marvel of the wisdom of God. And I hope everybody catches the picture. I'm so smart, I was trying to talk God out of the very thing that was the key to the future. I didn't want to get involved in it, but yet in God's goodness, he just kept
so good.
Opening doors and pushing. And sometimes in life, we miss it. And that's what's beautiful about the God we serve. We can miss it. Our heart's not evil. We're not trying to miss it, but God's a redeemer. He just kept redeeming the situation. And then at the right moment, he just showed this door to walk through. And so that was the beginning of humanitarian stuff, which gives us opportunity to do some of the things that we're doing in the current situation. Since that time, we went on with church planting, et cetera. And if I could just fast forward then to about 2005, and this is relevant to today and what's going on, and I could ask people to pray for this. The government came to us and asked if we would plant or establish an orphanage in a city in southern Ukraine, down near Crimea. It's called Kahovka, Kahovka, Ukraine, where they had a lot of kids living in the street without parents. They needed an orphanage there, but there was no money. And they had an old building that it wasn't that old. It was about 17 years old, that had been built to be a kindergarten by the Soviets right at the time of the demise of the Soviet Union. Therefore, it was never occupied, and it sat empty and dilapidated. And they said, we don't have any money, but we can give this building to be used for a home for orphans, and it's a very huge building. And if you'll do it, long story short, as Pam and I prayed about it, we felt the Lord direct us, do this. One thing was we had contacts in the city. It just so happened that our administrator in Kiev, which is 400 miles away, and is still with us to this day, been with us 20 some years, went to school in that town. And her parents were in that town, knew people in that town. So we had a little bit of a security of understanding people in the city. And this was done through the Department of Education. And so we did. We established an orphanage called House of Joy, and it exists to this day. And it's a little bit unique in that it is sanctioned by the government. It's not like just somebody went out and started a home. It is recognized by the government, but yet at the same time, they do not never have handled $1 of our funds that are donated. We actually, our partners paid for all the renovation, everything. We put in a state-of-the-art heating system, et cetera. And it's been a beautiful home for a lot of kids all these years. And the government has kept their word. And it's been a neat thing in the sense that those government sanctioned, we still operate it like we would if it was ours. We have camp in the summer. I'm talking about Christian camp where the gospel is preached. The kids are given Bibles and literature. We have Sunday school. We planted a church in that town, and that pastor's wife is the Bible teacher in our Sunday school. It's actually on Saturday school. And it's been a thing that's dear to our heart and heartbreaking to us to see what's happening in this conflict. And so we've been involved with that all these years. And now where it stands today, to fast forward to today, the kids there, a lot of people have asked us, how are they? Are their needs met? We're on the phone daily with them. It's in a city that is surrounded by Russian troops, so there's no way of evacuation for them. It's down by Crimea. If people have followed that, they see that that's the area that when Russia invaded was easiest for them to take. And so it quickly was surrounded. Yet at the same time, there's not anybody being harmed there. The kids are safe. The little guys sleep at night in the bomb shelter, which is actually the old basement underneath. In 2014, the government, when the invasion of Crimea happened, because it's close to Crimea, it's not in Crimea, but close, they told us to turn the basement into a bomb shelter. So currently what happens, they take the little guys, the young ones, and they sleep in the bomb shelter basement. The older kids are sleeping upstairs, but they sleep in their clothes in case the air raid sirens go off, and then they get them up and they quickly go down into the bomb shelter. And people have asked, what's the plan? I'm not at liberty to go into every detail here, but we are working on a possible evacuation if a route opens itself, if needed. It's not open right now. It's pretty surrounded, but it's a fluid situation that is changing by the day, sometimes by the hour. So we're just monitoring it. So if I could just ask that as people pray, they pray that we have wisdom of any steps to take. You may have seen on the news where in Mariupol, a town east of where our orphanage is, that's been pretty heavily shelled. There were 2 buses of children that were allowed to leave, but then fired upon. And so our team's just a little bit skittish about making any move at the current moment. And so if you would just pray that we have wisdom from the Lord of exactly what to do and how to do it.
So, Jim, you gave us a feel of the orphanage. Tell us about your staff, the operations that's happening right now. I mean, the war has devastated and crippled the whole country, but how's your team doing? Because I know that you've been, now for people that are listening right now, there's a lot more to what you're going through. Not only was you there right up until the day the war started, then you came out of the country. And basically your intent, you knew that something was going on. So you took in there a bunch of supplies, cash to be able to help run and operate these ministries that are going on right now. And you said it could not have been better timing for you to do that. And then you got out right when the war started and then went home. And then you had a total knee replacement and not realizing how bad it was going to get. And all of a sudden you come out of a total knee replacement and you're having to be running and helping communicate and organize what's going on there in the middle of a war, which, you knew that it was but God orchestrated all that. But I know that people need to be praying for your health, your stamina, wisdom, and all of that. But give us a feel of what your staff is going through, their families are going through, the operations right now with the ministry there.
That's a great question. And I maybe this at least kept my mind off my knee pain. That's probably been helpful, but it's true. I just felt impressed to go into Ukraine there when I did it late February. Right, like I said, I came out on the 20th, and I just felt impressed to go and honestly take money, cash, and I had quite a bit on me. And then I felt the Lord spoke to me, take another 20,000. And so I did. So I added to it. And some of it was for a project, a church plant. We were helping with a building that now they were going to close on a building. They needed just a little bit more money. And we were giving it to that. But now that's off the table for them. We're in contact with this pastor regularly. And so the money is being redirected to be used to help people in the situation. And we'll worry about all that other later after the war is over, if they're still able to buy the building. But it's turned out to be such a blessing in that we've had it right there to give. What's happened in some cases, we have channels through which we can send money, but it had gotten pretty risky to wire money into Ukraine. That's why we chose to take cash. And we did so, with the purpose of continuing to be able to fund the ministry until things played out. But as we got back and then all this happened, we've been looking for avenues through which to send money. Here's an example. Like the director of our orphanage, they have debit cards that we're able to transfer money onto. And then just all of a sudden they'll be blocked and they can't figure out why. And whether it's to do with the war or whatever. So it's just been a constant search, safe channels, trusted channels to get through. And to this point, we've been able to do it. But in other situations where our administrator's been able to take some of the cash I took in and just give it to a church that's helping the evacuees. And that's what we're focusing on right now. The need is immense. Outside the country, we see all the surrounding countries, Poland, Romania, Hungary, that are taking in refugees. In fact, one gal that has worked for us part-time has a 9-year-old son, and she's called us all through this. And her husband insisted she leave the country with their son, and she walked across the border of Romania. And a family took her into their home in Romania, and then took her to the airport, paid for her extra baggage fees, and she flew to Spain where she had a friend. And she just had a remarkable story about how people from all walks of life, never met him, just pitched in and helped her get to safety or get where she needed to be. So there's a lot of stories like that, as you see on the news, 1 million plus people and counting that have left the country. But as great of a need is refugees inside Ukraine, people that need to take refuge in a place of safety somewhere, but they don't want to leave the country. And many of them are like our administrator that I referenced earlier. They live in Kiev. In fact, I ate in their apartment the day before I left Ukraine, and they are in an area that's pretty dangerous in Kiev. Her husband works in telecommunications. In fact, many folks may have seen on the news about 2 days ago in Kiev, they shelled a TV tower that kept being played. I know Fox News kept running it quite a bit. And that tower is where our administrator's husband's equipment, the company he works for, is. And he's had to stay there and try to get the equipment running because they're trying to keep communication open. And it's just simple things like we're trying to find him a bulletproof vest and a helmet. a Kevlar helmet because of all that's going on around him, and finding that paying for it's not the problem. Many of us would pay for it for them, but, finding it. So that's what they're dealing with, those type things. For Yulia, her name is Yulia, they have a 23-year-old son and a 13-year-old son. And her husband insisted that they leave Kiev because it's so dangerous. But she said, I will not leave this country. I will not leave you. And so there's a city, and I probably shouldn't announce it, but it's in southwest Ukraine, where through a friend of her son, there was an apartment they could go and stay in. And there's been up to 19 of them staying in this apartment in southwest Ukraine, an area that is not being attacked like other parts of Ukraine. And so basically, they have taken refuge there. There's just, I guess, millions of people like that. Another example is in a city that is in south central Ukraine, we work with very closely. I don't want to call the city for security, but that pastor, they have been in existence about 25 plus years as a church. They had an opportunity to buy an old building about 3 years ago, and they felt they were supposed to do it. That old building has an old Soviet bomb shelter underneath it. And they've taken people from the east of Ukraine. They migrate to this point, further west, where it's a little safer than where they were. And they put them up. I've got video of the women in their church sewing together material just to make makeshift sheets to put on foam mattresses to make beds. And there's churches all over Ukraine doing this kind of thing. Back to our administrator, the city she took refuge in. It's a city that I actually have never been to. And she went out and found some local churches, 2 of them that are extremely active and helping 2 things, helping shuttle refugees that want to go to the border. And number 2, opening their church up. And I think the one's got maybe 130 beds in it, where people that are taking refuge come there on their journey to a place of safety, most of which spend the night and then move on. So what the church does is provides food, provides shelter, some cases gives clothing or whatever they need to continue their onward journey. Most of them is just a stop off to get to the next place, and they minister to them. And Jules noticed in one of them, she went in and they had the Book of Hope laying on a table. They're giving the gospel to people, et cetera, using it as an opportunity to build the kingdom of God in this hour. But I had to tell my administrator the other day, she was having a little bit of a hard time. I said, I'm sorry to say this, but you have to realize you're a refugee too. Refugee means simply you've been displaced from your home and you've taken refuge in another place. There are people all over Ukraine like that. Some want to leave the country, some do not. So we're focusing the majority of our efforts now in a humanitarian way on those that are staying inside the country, because we have boots on the ground, so to speak, and we have people that are able to distribute it. We have a couple of bank accounts through which we can send money, and then they can take it and go and buy supplies. In some cases, we just send, general support. We had 2 vans donated to our ministry today, actually in Romania, and we're working on the logistics to get them out. And when out of Romania into Ukraine, and when we do, we'll turn them over to these churches to use while the war is going on, because they have people willing to serve and drive people to the border. And as I said earlier, usually what they do is drive people to the border, then load up with supplies and come back. One of the beautiful things that Yulia talked about was how it blessed her. She said one of the churches, the pastor, he's about 60 years old. He's a bishop. He's an overseer. It's a Pentecostal church. And she said, I went and met with him. Said they were so gracious and kind and receiving and warm. But she said, I just noticed she said, it's a big church. She said, I don't know how many people they have in attendance, but said it just seemed like maybe half the church. She didn't know what percentage, but there were so many people from the church out there working. So the older ladies were cooking with smiles on their faces. The younger women were cleaning, and the young men were administrating, getting beds set up, et cetera. So, the people there are people of resilience, of resolve. They are determined. And it's just made us, Pam and I, just want to jump in there and be with them if we could be. But obviously, the best thing for us to do is to help and send the support that we can, send it to them. But one thing before we do end today, I want everybody to hear this part of it. And that is how amazing the churches have been in ministering to people in the middle of all this. And there's just no way in the world I can do anything but want to support them at the risk of their own lives, helping people get to places of safety, meeting their very basic needs of life. Our administrator husband has relatives in Kiev that are older that have now decided they want to leave Kiev. And this church where she's taken refuge, it's about 240 miles away. They don't even know these people, but said, when we can, we'll put them in the list. We'll go get them. We'll drive a van in and go get them. So it's really just like the demonstration of the gospel and compassion and action, which is very heartening and very encouraging.
Well, Jim, let us know how we can pray now. I appreciate you taking the time to be on with us and to be able to share. I know that for you and Pam are torn because you would love to be right there with the people that you have ministered to and lived with for many years, but yet you feel like you're better served to be here, being able to coordinate and to be able to organize people of prayer and then also resources to be able to send in cash and whatever resources you can get your hand on. And I know even Oklahoma and the governor here has worked with you in regards to trying to help with other needs that you have right now in Ukraine. But tell us how we can pray best for you, the ministries that's going on, or whatever it is you think that we need to be praying. Give us some idea how to be praying, and then also how we can support financially. And the need there. Obviously, there is a great need there too, but just reassure them that those monies will be able to go and that you will find ways, not just to throw money to the wind, but to find ways to be able to get the money into the right hands to help the right people.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll share the prayer points second. But first, I want to make sure I'm clear. We're not buying guns and bullets and weapons. We believe we war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers of darkness and spiritual wickedness in this world. I'm all for those that are buying guns and bullets, but in Ukraine, we're not doing that. We're focusing on the humanitarian need of it. At the same time, I'm all for those entities, governments that are helping them in their fight with what they need to fight the fight, to protect their country and to keep their country free and safe. But what our funds are going to is directly either to churches, and often it's channeled through churches where we know they're trusted and we see what they're doing, where we can check on, and they're buying the goods, they're buying the supplies, they're getting the stuff to the people. That's where we're focusing our efforts in country. People have asked, well, what about getting money to House of Joy? Yes, we're sending money as we can, and their needs are met. Actually, the mayor of that city sent out a public thing at the start of this.
And House of Joy is the orphanage, correct? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The orphanage that the mayor asked people in the city, said, take food over there, whatever, for those children. And they got inundated. In fact, our director had to say, stop, please stop, help other people. So I don't want to be misleading that, man, I got to have this today to feed orphans. The need is so bigger than that. All these people, women and children, basically fleeing for their lives, having to leave their husbands, leave their fathers, et cetera. So we're doing both. But that's where it's going. And the need is immense. And so anything that people give, I would just encourage, if any of your people want to give, they can give through our website if they want. But I would encourage, Pastor, if they just do it through the church and designate it Ukraine, and then you have the latitude and authority to distribute as you know as best as pastor. That's what I would encourage people to do. As far as what to pray, I'm pretty simple. Jesus said, pray this way. Father, your kingdom come, your will be done in earth as it is in heaven. And I really think that's the most important prayer to pray first. Then in all of this that is happening, that his kingdom come, his plan, his will be done. Now we know war is not the will of God, and he has a way to stop that. And that's what I'm praying happen. But first, we pray his kingdom come, his will be done in earth as it is in heaven, that people will come to know Christ as their source of peace, hope, and security in the midst of all of this. Secondly, we've been praying Proverbs 21:1, which says the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it wherever he will. We've been praying that God turn the hearts of kings, presidents, rulers, generals, that would intend evil and turn it the other direction. I was reading that scripture the other day, and the little part in there that says is in the hand of the Lord stuck out to me. The king's heart, where is it? It's in the hand of the Lord. And I'm just asking the Lord to take the heart of these people and turn it away from wanting to bring destruction to a peaceful people. I can tell you from all the Ukrainian people I know, they don't want war. They want peace. They just want to be left alone and to be able to live their lives in peace. And then a third way I think is good to pray. And we were talking about this on the Zoom prayer meeting with the church inside Ukraine today. I said, I believe you're going to see some Old Testament miracle stories come out of this. And I said, we're praying that God would confuse the enemy, just cause them to be confused in their circumstance and in their situation. I'm looking at my phone here. I got an email a while ago, and I'm going to pull it up. But one of the pastors in Ukraine sent this message just as a testimony. And if I can, it's short. I'll just read it. He said there were two families leaving a church in Mariupol. That's the city I referenced earlier on the southeast coast of Ukraine that's under heavy attack. They're church members, and they were these two families leaving Ukraine, and the local pastor told them to flee the city. And he drew them a map and told them which roads and paths to take. On their journey to safety, the Ukrainian and Russian armies were involved in a gun battle near them. And they said bullets were flying around them, hitting objects near them. But both our families all made it out to safely, and no one was hurt. And I would just say the fourth thing, pray for that kind of safety, that the angels of the Lord would encamp around his people. This pastor was telling me there was a Ukrainian, a military officer who is not a Christian, but his brother is a follower of Christ. And the one who is not a Christian said to his brother, please keep speaking words of faith, that supernatural things are happening. Do not stop. Keep your faith high and continue to pray for them. And so, in the midst of all this, God can take all the things that are intended for evil and turn them and use them for good. And that's the fifth and last thing I say to pray, that God take everything intended for evil and somehow turn it and use it for good.
Jim, thank you so very much. And that last story I saw that on Facebook today. And so people that are watching, you can go to check you out on Facebook. Also, your website. Tell us your website address, though, please.
It's www.awakinghope.com. I'm going to spell it because a lot of people think it's awakening. It's AWAKINGHOPE.com. AWAKINGHOPE.com.
Thank you so very much.
A funny story behind that, just real quick. When we established our ministry many years ago, it was legally done under the name of Jim King Ministries, like a lot of people did back in the early 80s. And for years I said, I want my name off that. Ministry is not about a person. And so we actually hired a guy to pick a name. And he said, I want you to tell me everything you do. And he came and he had about 4 options. He said, this is what I see you doing when you told me what your ministry does. And he said, basically, you awaken hope in people. In small communities, you plant churches, you do humanitarian relief, et cetera. I said, I like that concept. Let's just go with that one. Frankly, I was just so quickly wanting to get my name off of it. I didn't care what it was. So later I asked him, I said, why did you come up with awaking? And he said, he got a sheepish look on his face. He said, well, actually, I looked for words of description with K-I-N-G in it, your last name, in case you ever wanted to focus on that. And I said, that's the very thing I wanted to get away from. So I probably wouldn't pick the name. I tell that story because sometimes people think it's awakening, but it's awakinghope.com. Thank you for your interest, your support. And Pastor Rodney, thanks for your friendship. And again, I want to say, I want your church to know I appreciate pastors like yours that have taken time more than once to call and check on us and on the work there. It means more than you know. Thanks for your prayer support.
Well, Jim, thank you so very much. And for everyone who is watching right now, I hope that you will share this with someone and encourage people to watch this so that they can hear this story, the real life story of somebody who is making a difference in the ministry impact that's going on presently in Ukraine. And then if you want to give and support, feel free to go directly to his website, but you can also give directly to north.church, and we will make sure, please mark it special offering Ukraine, and we will make sure that every penny of that goes toward Jim King and his ministry. We've actually sent already some money to some other organizations, but for this, it's going to be going toward Jim King and what's going on with Awakening Hope ministry there. And so just please make sure you give toward that. And thank you very much, Jim. Love you very much. And I hope that you get well soon. I know what a knee recovery is for a total knee replacement. And so I'll be praying for you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. Tell Pam hi. Love you. And very much.
Same as him. All right. Bless you.
Thank you for joining us today. And I hope that you will join us again next week for Up and to the Right.